We often think of karma as something personal. What I do, what I say, what I think, and the consequences that come back to me. It feels linear. You hurt someone, you get hurt. You give, you receive. A sort of moral accounting system that governs individual fate. But what if karma is not just about you? What if your actions, your thoughts, your way of living didn't just return to you, but rippled out into your family, your community, your children, and even those unborn? What if your unhealed trauma becomes someone else's burden to carry? Karma, in its deeper understanding, is not a closed loop, it's an open thread. It weaves itself into the fabric of relationships, habits, emotional patterns, belief systems, and most powerfully, into what we pass on, consciously or not. You may die one day, but your karma doesn't necessarily end with you. It may survive in how your child reacts to anger, in how your partner learns to love, in how a community processes fear. And yet, we rarely pause to think about that. In the chaos of urban life, we're often caught in the now, deadline to deadline, meeting to meeting, reaction to reaction. There's barely time to breathe, let alone to ask, what am I actually leaving behind? Not in terms of money, property, or even reputation, but in emotional legacies, behavioral echoes, energy fields we never question. This is not about guilt, it's about awakening. Because once you see karma beyond yourself, you begin to understand your life is not isolated. You are part of a lineage, and everything you do either heals or deepens that lineage's pain. We don't just inherit genes from our parents. We inherit their karma, their wounds, their silences, their ways of coping. And unless we become conscious, we pass them on. A man who suppresses his emotions because his father never showed softness grows into a father who tells his son to man up, unknowingly continuing a karmic loop of emotional neglect. A woman raised in fear of scarcity teaches her daughter to mistrust abundance and play it small, not realizing she's passing on a karmic belief system. This is the unseen legacy. And while karma is complex, its transformation starts in the most intimate places, within the walls of your home, in your daily conversations, in how you treat your own inner world. Your choice to pause before reacting can alter the course of your child's psychological landscape. Your choice to heal your anger can change how your partner learns to be loved. Your choice to forgive your past may unshackle generations to come. We often ask, what did I inherit from my parents? But a more powerful question is, what are my children, my friends, my future generations inheriting from me right now, in this moment? Because you are always creating karma, and some karma lives long after you're gone. The good news? You can choose what legacy you leave behind, not through grand gestures, but through quiet, consistent presence, through self-awareness, through the decision to stop repeating what hurt you and start creating what heals. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be awake. Because one awake person in a family, in a lineage, in a generation, can change everything. So this journey begins here, not by looking at karma as fate, but as a field. A field you are seeding every day. What will you plant? There are wounds that bleed, and then there are wounds that echo. Emotional karma is not about what happened to us. It's about what we do with what happened. When pain is left unspoken, it doesn't disappear. It hides. It waits. It embeds itself into our reactions, our tone of voice, our facial expressions, the way we withdraw, the way we explode, the way we love with fear or control with tenderness. These unspoken energies become the silent inheritance of those closest to us. A father who never forgave his own father becomes harsh with his children, believing he's teaching discipline. A mother who is abandoned as a child becomes overly protective, smothering her child in fear disguised as love. And the children grow up confused, trying to make sense of emotions that don't belong fully to them. They feel guilt without knowing why, carry shame they didn't earn, live out patterns they never consciously chose. This is emotional karma. It's invisible, yet it writes the script of our most intimate relationships. In modern urban life, this cycle becomes even more intense. The pressure to perform, the isolation masked by digital connection, the constant hustle leaves no space to sit with what we feel. So we bury emotions deeper. We say, "I'm fine," when we're not. We scroll through distractions instead of sitting with grief. We joke about trauma instead of healing it. And without awareness, the pain we hide becomes the pain we hand down. Not because we're cruel, but because we're unconscious. Emotional karma is passed through reactions, not intentions. Your anger may have reasons, but if it shows up in your child's nervous system, it becomes their story. Your fear may be valid, but if it limits your partner's dreams, it becomes their burden. Your inability to express love because you were never shown how, that's not your fault. But the moment you see it, it becomes your responsibility. Healing emotional karma doesn't mean blaming your parents or shaming yourself. It means tracing the emotional lineage with compassion. It means asking, why do I react this way? Where did I learn this silence? What did I absorb that was never mine to carry? And more importantly, what can I release so my children don't have to hold it for me? In every family, there is a pain that wants to be seen, a wound that wants to be named, and a cycle that wants to be broken. And you might be the one who can break it, not by fixing others, but by turning inward, by noticing what triggers you, by holding space for emotions instead of judging them, by saying to your inner child, "I see you. You don't have to scream anymore." This is how inherited pain begins to dissolve, not through confrontation, but through deep, quiet witnessing, through presence, through compassion, through the radical act of not passing on what you didn't choose. Emotional karma is like a river that's been flowing for generations. Most people are carried by the current, but you can step out. You can build a bridge. You can offer your children a new stream, one shaped by awareness rather than avoidance. And it starts here with you, with your breath, with your willingness to feel what others ran from. Because when one person chooses to heal, the entire lineage feels it. Healing is never just personal. It is always generational. Words are not just sounds. They are seeds. Every word you speak carries the power to build or to break, to uplift or to diminish, to open a path or to shut it down entirely. We often underestimate the impact of what we say, especially to children, to loved ones, to ourselves. But over time, repeated phrases become beliefs, and beliefs become karma. When a child hears, "You're so dramatic," every time they cry, they learn that emotions are bad. When a teenager hears, "You'll never succeed," they begin to internalize limitation as identity. When a partner hears, "You're too sensitive," they start to question their truth. Words spoken in moments of frustration or ignorance don't vanish, they echo. They settle deep into the subconscious, forming the foundation of how we see ourselves and what we believe is possible. This is the karma of words, and it is often the most silent, the most lasting. In modern urban life, we are surrounded by language constantly. Advertising that tells us we're not enough, social media that shames us or flatters, workplace jargon that reduces people to roles or metrics. But the most potent language is still the one spoken in the intimacy of homes and hearts. Many of us walk around with invisible scripts playing in our minds, scripts that were written by others, but now feel like our own voice. I'm not good enough. I always mess things up. I don't deserve love. These aren't random thoughts. They are karmic imprints, the result of words spoken, absorbed, and repeated until they became belief. And once belief takes root, we act from it. We limit ourselves. We sabotage connection. We shrink to fit a story we never chose. The karma of words is not just about what was said to us. It's also about what we say to others now. Because if you haven't healed the words that wounded you, you might unknowingly pass them on. You might raise your voice in the same tone that once silenced you. You might joke in the same way that once humiliated you. You might speak to your child with the same sharpness you swore you'd never repeat. Unless you become conscious. And once you are conscious, you gain the power to choose a different language. You can speak words that soothe instead of scar, that awaken instead of shut down. You can say to your partner, "I hear you," instead of "you're too much." You can say to your child, "Your feelings matter," instead of "stop crying." You can say to yourself, "I am learning," instead of "I failed again." Words are not just communication. They are karma in motion. They shape relationships. They shape destinies. They shape entire cultures. And in every moment, with every sentence, you are either repeating the karma you inherited or rewriting it. So ask yourself, what words shaped me? Which ones still live in me like ghosts? Which ones do I want to release? Which ones do I want to pass on? The tongue has no bones, yet it carries generational weight. It can carry trauma, or it can carry truth. Choose wisely. Speak kindly, because every word you offer is a seed. What are you planting? Not all violence screams. Some of it whispers. Some of it smiles. Some of it stays silent in a room full of pain and pretends everything is fine. This is the realm of subtle violence, the kind that doesn't leave bruises but still wounds deeply, the kind that's accepted as normal, even polite, in many homes, cultures, and relationships. Suppression is a form of this violence. When emotions are not allowed, when truths are avoided, when vulnerability is met with discomfort or dismissal, something within us learns to hide. And what hides doesn't disappear, it waits. It festers. It finds other ways to express itself. A child who is never allowed to cry becomes an adult who cannot grieve. A teenager who is told to stay strong becomes someone who breaks quietly under pressure. A woman who is told she's too emotional learns to doubt her intuition. A man who is mocked for his sensitivity becomes hardened, not because he is cruel, but because he was taught softness was weakness. This is how suppression becomes karma. The silence you learned as survival becomes your child's language of disconnection. The smile you wear to hide your truth becomes the mask your partner cannot see through. The distance you keep to feel safe becomes the loneliness that others inherit from you. In a society that rewards productivity over presence, image over authenticity, and certainty over emotional complexity, suppression is normalized. We are taught to be professional, composed, strong, but rarely taught how to feel, express, and process. And so, we carry generations of emotional avoidance. We pretend. We perform. We pass it on. But the karma of suppression is not just personal. It's contagious. It shapes how we relate, how we raise children, how we build culture. It teaches the next generation not to feel too much, not to need too much, not to ask too much. It builds relationships where people coexist without connection, speak without truth, touch without intimacy. And in time, this becomes a lineage of numbness. But there is another way. Healing this karma begins with permission. The permission to feel, to speak, to not know, to be raw, to be real. It begins when you notice the moment you want to shut down and instead choose to stay open. It begins when you stop calling silence strength and start calling it what it often is, fear. Suppression is not strength. It is unprocessed pain. And the only way to dissolve that pain is to bring it into the light of awareness. To name what was once hidden. To feel what was once forbidden. To speak what was once swallowed. This act of breaking the silence may be the most powerful karmic shift you ever create. Because when you make space for your own truth, you make space for others to be fully alive around you. And that is the opposite of subtle violence. That is subtle love. The kind that says, you are safe to be here. You are allowed to feel this. You don't have to hold it alone. The kind of love that ends generations of emotional exile with a single act of presence. So pay attention, not just to what you say, but to what you avoid, to what you stuff down, to what you deny. That's where your hidden karma lives, and that's where your healing begins. We are born into stories long before we can write our own. These stories come wrapped in tradition, in religion, in media, in school books, in lullabies, in jokes told at the dinner table, in the silent rules we learn just by watching others live. This is cultural karma, the collective imprint of belief systems passed from one generation to the next, not through force, but through familiarity. These beliefs tell us who we are, what matters, what's acceptable, and what success looks like. They tell men not to cry. They tell women to please. They tell children to obey, workers to grind, lovers to fear vulnerability. And because everyone around us believes the same stories, we rarely stop to ask if they're true. We confuse repetition with wisdom. We mistake conformity for clarity. And in doing so, we carry karma that was never consciously chosen. Think about the messages you received growing up, not just from your family, but from the world. Maybe you were told that rest is laziness, that questioning elders is disrespectful, that wealth equals worth, that status means safety. Maybe you were told that your skin, your gender, your body, your background made you less. Or more. These are not facts. They are inherited lenses. They filter how we see the world, how we treat others, how we relate to ourselves. And because they are embedded early, they become invisible. Like wallpaper we never noticed but grew up staring at every day. Cultural karma isn't just in what we believe, it's in what we never think to question. It lives in the pressure to be productive at all times, even when exhausted. It lives in the fear of being too much or not enough. It lives in the way we judge others for making choices outside the accepted script. But here's the truth. Culture is not static. It is a living organism, shaped by those who participate in it. And every time you question a toxic belief, every time you choose authenticity over approval, every time you challenge a norm that no longer serves, you begin to shift the karma of your culture. You become a ripple of change. This doesn't mean rejecting your roots. It means examining them, honoring what's true and releasing what's harmful. It means asking, does this belief bring more fear or more freedom? More compassion or more control? More presence or more performance? Most people never ask these questions. They follow the script, they pass it on. And so the karma continues. But you, if you're listening, if you're reading, if you're reflecting, then something in you is already awakening. You're starting to see the story instead of just living it. And once you see the story, you can rewrite it. You can become a conscious author instead of an unconscious actor. This is the power of spiritual inquiry. Not to escape culture, but to transform it. To create a new lineage, not just for your family, but for your community, your generation, your descendants. A lineage based not on fear, but on freedom. Not on silence, but on truth. Not on shame, but on sacred presence. Because the karma we inherit is not our fault, but the karma we pass on is our responsibility. And it begins with one bold, humble, radical act to pause and ask, is this story still true for me? If not, let it go. Let it end with you. Because every story you rewrite becomes a new path for those who walk after you. Families are the first mirrors we ever look into. Before we know ourselves, we see ourselves reflected in the faces of those who raised us. Their behaviors become our blueprint. Their fears become our guardrails. Their unspoken rules become our invisible limitations. This is how family karma forms, not from one grand event, but from small, repeated patterns lived over years, passed like heirlooms wrapped in silence. You may think your anger is your own until you realize it sounds just like your father's. You may believe your need to please is a personality trait until you remember how your mother stayed small to survive. You may think your inability to commit is a flaw until you notice the generational fear of abandonment that echoes through your lineage. This is not coincidence. This is karmic patterning. Families unconsciously teach through repetition, not by what they say, but by what they do, by what they avoid, by what they normalize. Maybe your family never talked about emotions, so you learned to bury yours. Maybe they used shame as discipline, so you equated love with pain. Maybe they avoided conflict, so now you fear honesty. And the most dangerous patterns are the ones we call just the way it is. The father who never hugged his son becomes the grandfather who cannot connect with his grandson. The mother who sacrificed her dreams becomes the grandmother who encourages her granddaughter to do the same. And unless someone awakens, these loops become fate disguised as family tradition. But fate can be interrupted. And you might be the interrupter, the one who sees the pattern, the one who questions it, the one who says, "It ends with me." This is not about blaming your family. It's about liberating them. It's about seeing the pain behind the behavior and choosing not to pass it on. You cannot change your ancestry, but you can change your inheritance. You can choose presence over reaction, truth over silence, connection over control. You can choose to hug your children even if you were never hugged. You can speak your truth even if your parents feared it. You can rest, dream, play, even if no one in your family ever did. And in doing so, you don't just heal yourself. You heal generations, because karmic patterns are not permanent. They are repeated until they are remembered, witnessed, grieved, and released. Until someone, maybe you, has the courage to feel what others denied, to face what others avoided, to love in ways your lineage forgot. And no, it's not easy. Being the breaker of patterns is lonely work. You will be misunderstood. You will feel guilt. You will face resistance. But you will also feel something deeper, freedom. Not just for you, but for the ancestors who never had the chance, and for the descendants who will walk lighter because you chose to heal. So look closely at your family, not with judgment, but with curiosity. What do they avoid? What do they repeat? What did they survive? And how did they adapt? Then ask yourself, am I still living from their fear or from my truth? Because the past only becomes fate when it's unconscious. Once you see it, you have a choice. And with every conscious choice, you change the karmic future. Scarcity is more than a financial condition. It's a mindset, a vibration, a karmic echo that can shape generations. You may think your fear of not having enough comes from your bank account, but often it comes from the beliefs you inherited long before you ever earned your first dollar. Beliefs like money is hard to come by. Rich people are greedy. It's selfish to want more, or there's never enough to go around. These aren't truths. They are karmic scripts written by those who came before you, people who may have lived through war, displacement, poverty, oppression, people who equated survival with worth, people who had to hustle for every breath of security and pass down that urgency as love. And so even if you're living in a world of relative abundance, you might still feel like you're constantly one step away from losing it all. You might hoard time, energy, money, not because you're greedy, but because you're afraid. You might undercharge your gifts, overextend yourself at work, feel guilty for resting, or panic when things are going well, as if peace is something you don't deserve. This is economic karma. It's not about how much you have, but how deeply you believe you are allowed to have it. Scarcity mindset isn't just about money. It's about love, time, attention, creativity. It says, if I relax, I'll fall behind. If I don't prove my worth, I'll be forgotten. If I succeed, I'll lose connection. If I rest, I'll be punished. And we don't just suffer this karma. We teach it. We model it to our children. We normalize burnout. We glorify overwork. We shame asking for help. We fear being seen as too much. And the cycle continues. But what if abundance is not something you chase, but something you remember? What if worth is not earned, but revealed? What if healing your relationship with enoughness is one of the most powerful karmic acts you can offer your lineage? Because when you begin to believe you are enough and that life can support you, you stop acting from fear. You stop teaching fear. You stop reinforcing fear. You start resting. You start trusting. You start sharing, not from sacrifice, but from overflow. You start showing your children that they don't have to trade their aliveness for security, that they can create, not just survive, that money is a tool, not a measure of value, that abundance is a state of being, not a bank balance. And no, this shift won't happen overnight. The scarcity wound is deep. It's layered. It lives in your nervous system, your language, your posture. But every time you choose to breathe instead of panic, to invest instead of hoard, to trust instead of control, you are breaking the curse. You are changing the story. You are creating karmic wealth, not just in finances, but in freedom. Because the richest inheritance you can give is not just money. It's the permission to believe in enough. To know that being alive is not a debt to be repaid, it is a gift to be received. And when you fully receive it, you become the ancestor who passed down abundance, not fear. Faith can be a doorway or a prison. It all depends on whether it is chosen or inherited without reflection. Religious karma is the weight of beliefs passed down not as invitations to awaken, but as rules to obey. It begins with stories told as absolutes, commandments accepted without questioning, rituals performed without understanding, and identities assumed without personal experience. When children are told what to believe, but never invited to explore why, they grow into adults who confuse obedience with truth and fear with reverence. They carry guilt for asking hard questions, shame for feeling doubt, and anxiety when their lived experience contradicts the teachings they were raised on. This is not faith. This is karmic programming, and it often disconnects us not only from our spiritual essence, but from ourselves. Maybe you are taught that suffering is noble, so you subconsciously resist joy. Maybe you are told certain people are beyond redemption, so you hide parts of yourself to feel worthy. Maybe your tradition told you that your desires are sinful, so you suppress your life force and call it purity. None of this is true wisdom. It is inherited fear dressed as holiness. And unless you wake up, you might pass it on, not just the stories, but the silence, the inner fragmentation, the rejection of the soul in the name of tradition. This is religious karma, not because religion itself is harmful, but because anything practiced without awareness becomes a cage. Even light, when forced, can blind. But there is another way. True faith is not memorized, it is metabolized. It is not about swallowing beliefs whole, but tasting them, living them, letting them change you from the inside. Living wisdom invites inquiry. It welcomes the heart's trembling. It honors the mystery, the nuance, the paradox. It doesn't demand perfection, it nurtures presence. When you begin to walk the path of conscious spirituality, you reclaim the sacred not from books or rules, but from your own experience. You realize that the divine is not confined to one name, one path, or one ritual. It lives in your breath, in your stillness, in your capacity to love without condition. And suddenly, the fear-based doctrines begin to dissolve. You stop needing to be right and start longing to be real. You stop forcing your beliefs on others and start embodying them quietly, like a tree offering shade. You stop passing down shame in the name of salvation, and instead, you pass on freedom. You show your children that God is not angry, that worth is not earned, that love is not conditional. You show them that faith can feel like coming home, not hiding who you are. You give them permission to ask questions, to feel doubt, to explore paths, and still be loved. Because that is what religion was meant to be. Not a cage, but a compass. Not a script, but a sanctuary. Not karma, but awakening. So take a moment to ask yourself, what beliefs have I inherited that no longer serve the soul? What rituals do I perform out of fear, not reverence? What stories have shaped my relationship with the sacred, and are they still true? Then breathe. Listen. Begin again. The most radical act of faith may be to leave behind what was never yours and walk toward what is truly alive within you. That is how religious karma ends, not in rebellion, but in remembering. Avoidance is quiet, subtle, and socially acceptable. It doesn't look like harm at first. It looks like being polite, like staying busy, like moving on. But over time, avoidance becomes its own kind of violence. Not loud, but deep. Not obvious, but enduring. The karma of avoidance is built on the moments we look away when we should have looked within. The truths we swallow because they're uncomfortable. The apologies we never make. The conversations we never have. The grief we bury under productivity. The anger we mask with a smile. The wounds we cover with distractions, hoping they'll heal on their own. But they don't. What is not faced does not disappear. It festers. And eventually, it spills. Into relationships that can't hold the weight of our silence. Into children who inherit our emotional debris. Into choices made from fear, not freedom. We think we're protecting others by hiding our pain. But we're only delaying the moment it erupts somewhere else, usually where it hurts most. Avoidance is not peace, it's postponement. And it creates karma not just in us, but around us. A parent who avoids conflict raises a child afraid of confrontation. A partner who avoids vulnerability creates a bond rooted in performance, not intimacy. A leader who avoids accountability models a culture of silence and shame. And the longer we avoid, the more our lives fill with ghosts, things unsaid, feelings unfelt, truths unmet. These ghosts follow us. They haunt our decisions. They shape our identity. They create an atmosphere of tension, even in stillness. And the worst part? We teach others to do the same. We pass down emotional numbness as maturity. We confuse denial with strength. We model emotional absence as composure. And so the pattern continues. But facing the truth doesn't mean collapsing into it. It means turning toward it with softness, with breath, with courage. It means asking the hard questions and being willing to sit with the answers. It means holding space for the parts of you that were never held. It means making space for discomfort, because all growth begins at the edge of what we'd rather not feel. When you choose to face what's hard, you break the karmic cycle. You stop handing your fear to others. You become the one who says, "This ends with me." You become the one who listens instead of shuts down, who speaks instead of swallows, who feels instead of flees. And in that choice, you create a different legacy, one of wholeness, of integrity, of truth. Because truth is not always easy, but it's always clean. It clears the air. It makes room. It opens space for love to breathe. Avoidance may feel safe, but truth sets you free. And that freedom is the most sacred inheritance you can offer to those who come after you. It doesn't take a revolution to change the course of history. Sometimes it takes a pause, a breath, a single moment of awareness in the middle of a storm. Karma is often imagined as a massive force, an unchangeable tide we're doomed to ride. But that's not truth. It's a story we've inherited. Karma is not punishment. It is momentum. And momentum can be redirected the moment we become aware. You don't need to fix your entire family. You don't need to solve every problem from your childhood. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to be present. Because in one conscious act, you begin to break the chain. One breath taken instead of lashing out. One truth spoken instead of swallowed. One apology offered instead of defended. One boundary set with love instead of resentment. One conversation held instead of avoided. These seem small, but they are seismic. They are interruptions in the karmic pattern. They are sacred ruptures in the repetition of pain. And when done with presence, not performance, they send shockwaves of healing through the invisible field of your lineage. When you choose awareness over reaction, you are not just healing yourself. You are becoming the medicine your ancestors never had, the voice they lost, the softness they feared, the love they withheld. And at the same time, you become a sanctuary for those who come after you. You become the ancestor they will thank, not because you were flawless, but because you were brave enough to feel, brave enough to break, brave enough to rebuild a story rooted in truth, not trauma. One conscious act may not undo centuries of pain, but it starts a ripple, and ripples grow. They touch hearts you'll never meet. They plant seeds in minds not yet born. They echo in the tone of your voice, the gentleness of your presence, the way you hold space instead of fill it with noise. This is how lineages change, not through force, but through attention, through choosing again. Choosing softness where there was once hardness, choosing stillness where there was once chaos, choosing truth where there was once silence. And even when no one else sees it, even when your family continues their patterns, even when your actions feel invisible, the karma is shifting. The soil is softening. The future is being rewritten. You are not alone in this. The ancestors who longed for healing but didn't know how, they're with you. The children who will never know the weight of your pain, they are benefiting. And your own soul, finally seen, finally honored, finally held, that is the proof that this work matters. So take the breath, make the choice, say the thing, forgive the past, create the space. One conscious act, done with love, has more karmic power than 1,000 unconscious lifetimes. Let it begin with you. Let it begin now. Parenting is not just guidance, it is transmission. It is not only what we teach, but who we are that shapes a child's inner world. And while we may focus on what school they attend, what food they eat, what habits they form, the most potent influence we pass down is our emotional frequency. Children are sponges for energy. They listen with their skin. They absorb our reactions, our tone, our facial expressions, our silences. Long before they understand language, they understand safety. Before they know right from wrong, they know whether love feels warm or conditional. This is the true karmic field of parenting, not rules, but resonance, not control, but modeling. A parent who says, "You're safe," but lives in constant fear creates confusion in the child's nervous system. A parent who says, "You're loved," but withdraws emotionally when overwhelmed teaches love as performance. A parent who preaches kindness, but gossips at the dinner table teaches duplicity. And none of this is intentional. Most of it is unconscious, passed down, inherited, recycled. This is karmic parenting, not because we are bad, but because we are unexamined. The wounds we don't tend to become the lessons our children learn by default. The emotions we suppress become the feelings they are afraid to feel. The parts of us we reject become the parts of them they'll hide. But here is the miracle. Healing is also contagious. Presence is also transmitted. When a parent breathes before reacting, they teach regulation. When a parent apologizes, they teach humility. When a parent allows themselves to be human, they give the child permission to be whole. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be real. You need to do the work not only for yourself, but because you understand that every unhealed part of you will echo in your child's world. And every healed part of you will offer them a new inheritance. This doesn't mean you never mess up. It means you repair. You reflect. You stay in relationship instead of hiding behind roles. You ask, what am I teaching in this moment? Not with my words, but with my being. And if the answer is fear, shame, pressure, or avoidance, you get to choose again. You get to show your child what it looks like to grow, to change, to evolve. That is the greatest lesson. Because parenting is not about raising perfect children. It's about creating a space where children feel safe to be themselves. It's about offering presence instead of perfection, connection instead of control, wonder instead of expectation. And when you parent with awareness, you don't just break cycles. You create new possibilities. You become the ancestor your child will thank. You become the place where the pain stops and the peace begins. And years from now, when they speak about their childhood, they won't remember every rule or every moment, but they will remember how they felt in your presence. That is the karma that matters most. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is not forgetting. It is not saying what happened was okay. Forgiveness is the quiet, radical decision to no longer let the past write your present. It is the sacred act of breaking the karmic bond between pain and identity. Because every resentment, every bitterness, every memory we revisit with rage is a cord that ties us to the wound. And where there is attachment to the wound, there is karma. Not because life is punishing us, but because we are replaying the story. Again and again, hoping for a different ending. But the story won't change by revisiting it. It changes when we stop feeding it, when we see it with new eyes. When we say, this hurt, but I choose not to carry it forward. That is forgiveness. Not for them, for you. Not to let someone off the hook, but to free yourself from the emotional architecture built around a pain that is no longer happening. When we do not forgive, we transmit. The resentment becomes our posture, our tone, our default state. We pass it to our children in the form of guarded hearts and sharp tongues. We pass it to our partners in the form of mistrust and withdrawal. We pass it to our own bodies as tension, illness, disconnection. And we wonder why nothing feels safe. But when we forgive, truly forgive, we reclaim authorship of our own nervous system. We soften. We make space for joy where there was only defense. We choose peace not as a feeling, but as a practice. And no, it's not instant. Forgiveness is not a light switch. It is a slow thawing, a quiet unclenching, a steady remembering that we are more than what happened to us, that we don't need to carry someone else's karma like a badge of honor. That releasing doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing. And in that freedom, something astonishing happens. The karmic loop dissolves. What would have been passed on, bitterness, fear, guardedness, is replaced with presence, compassion, clarity. The lineage is altered. Not because you changed the past, but because you changed your relationship to it. This is karma repair. Not with vengeance, but with grace, with tears, with truth, with the gentle choice to stop dragging the past into the future. And maybe, in the quiet, you'll even feel your ancestors exhale. Maybe you'll sense that the pain you are releasing now was never only yours. Maybe you are healing for more than just yourself. Because forgiveness, in its truest form, is an act of love that transcends time. It reaches backward to release those who could not change. And it reaches forward to protect those not yet born. It is not the end of a story. It is the beginning of peace. And it starts the moment you choose to let go, not of what happened, but of who you had to become in response to it. Karma does not stop at the door of your home. It stretches beyond bloodlines and surnames. It moves through streets, systems, cities, and generations. Community karma is the energetic imprint of what we allow, what we normalize, what we silence, and what we celebrate together. It is the shared residue of injustices never addressed, truths never told, traumas collectively denied. It is the violence we scroll past, the suffering we call statistics, the inequality we rationalize as structure. And just like personal karma, if left unconscious, it compounds. A society that prioritizes profit over people creates burnout as a baseline. A culture that idolizes productivity shames rest and vulnerability. A nation that avoids its historical wounds keeps recreating them under new names. And even if you didn't cause the damage, if you live within the field of that community, you feel it. You carry it. You breathe it. This is not guilt. This is interconnectedness. It's understanding that we are not separate from the systems we inhabit. The pain of a neighborhood neglected, a school underfunded, a voice unheard, it doesn't just belong to them. It lives in the fabric of who we become together. It influences how safe we feel, how we trust, how we dream. And yet, the same principle applies. Karma is not fate. It is function. And what is made by many can be unmade by many. Every time you act with integrity in a system built on shortcuts, you change the field. Every time you include someone who has been excluded, you rewrite the code. Every time you listen where silence once reigned, you open a portal of collective healing. We often think our individual choices are too small to matter, but they matter more than we know, because energy is contagious. So is presence, so is truth, so is kindness. And when enough people start making conscious choices in unconscious systems, the system begins to shift. Community karma starts to lighten. The air becomes more breathable. The culture begins to remember what it forgot, that dignity is not a privilege, but a birthright, that justice is not optional, but essential, that healing is not individual, but relational. You are not responsible for all the world's pain, but you are responsible for your thread in the tapestry. And when you pull that thread with care, with awareness, with humility, the entire fabric begins to reweave itself. It doesn't require a title, a movement, a miracle. It requires showing up differently. In your workplace, in your friendships, in your vote, in your voice, in your silence. Because what we create together, we inherit together. And what we heal together, we liberate together. This is not just about karma. This is about co-creation. You are not here to fix the world. You are here to love it enough to not abandon it. You are here to be part of the remembering that we belong to each other, that we rise or fall together. That healing is not something we wait for. It is something we choose, moment by moment, in community, in courage, in care. You don't need to escape your life to transform your karma. You need to meet it with breath, with softness, with presence. Healing inherited patterns is not about effort. It's about awareness. And awareness is a practice, not a performance, not a philosophy, a practice, something you return to, something you remember, something that remembers you. The karmic loops you carry are woven into your body, your thoughts, your relationships. You cannot think your way out of them. You must feel your way through. And this is where spiritual practices become essential, not as dogma, but as medicine, as tools that anchor you to the present so you stop reenacting the past. Mindfulness is the beginning, the gentle noticing of your breath, your sensations, your patterns. When you pause and simply observe your reaction without acting it out, you break the cycle. When you stay in the moment instead of spinning stories, you break the cycle. When you breathe through discomfort instead of escaping it, you break the cycle. Somatic awareness deepens this. Because trauma lives in the body, karma too. It's not just in your thoughts. It's in your shoulders, your jaw, your belly. When you bring compassion to those places, when you let the body release what the mind cannot explain, you create space for something new. Inner child work is another doorway. Because so much of inherited karma begins with the child inside you who was never seen, held, or heard. When you speak gently to that part of yourself, when you offer what your caregivers could not, when you validate your own experience, you become the parent your lineage needed. You stop repeating the abandonment. You become the beginning of safety. Ritual is the final layer. Not ritual as routine, but as sacred symbol. Lighting a candle for your ancestors and speaking the truth they were never allowed to say. Writing letters to the past and burning them with love. Creating space in your home that honors the new story you are living. These acts are not small. They are intentional interruptions in the karmic field. They signal to your nervous system, to your lineage, to the universe. Something different is happening here. Someone is waking up. Someone is choosing differently. Someone is planting new seeds. And over time, these practices, done with sincerity, not perfection, become your new baseline. They don't erase the past, but they loosen its grip. They don't make you immune to pain, but they give you tools to move through it without handing it forward. And that is the essence of spiritual practice. Not to transcend the human experience, but to meet it with grace. To make it conscious, to make it sacred. You don't need a guru. You don't need a temple. You don't need years of silence. You need a moment. This moment, a decision, to stop, to breathe, to return. And in doing so, to say to yourself, to your ancestors, to your descendants, I am here. I am willing. I am the one who breaks the chain. Not through force, but through presence. Not through drama, but through devotion. And that devotion becomes the new inheritance. Not karma, but peace. One day, you will be someone's ancestor. Your name may be forgotten. Your face may fade. But your energy, the choices you make, the love you embody, the presence you offer, will ripple forward. You are shaping that legacy right now. Every breath, every word, every silence, every act of courage becomes part of the unseen inheritance you leave behind. Most people live without knowing this. They pass down their wounds by default. Their shame, their fears, their unresolved stories become the emotional DNA of the next generation. But you have chosen to see. And once you see, you cannot unsee. You know now that karma is not just yours to carry. It is yours to transform. And you don't need to do it perfectly. You just need to do it consciously. When you choose to pause before reacting, you are creating karmic light. When you tell the truth, even when your voice shakes, you are creating karmic light. When you allow your child to feel, when you listen without fixing, when you love without conditions, when you forgive the past, not because it deserved it, but because your future does, you are creating karmic light. And that light becomes your legacy. Not in a monument, not in money, not in achievements, but in the way someone feels safe to be themselves because you modeled authenticity. In the way someone trusts love again because you didn't withhold yours. In the way a child breathes more freely because you healed what once suffocated you. This is how we become the ancestors worth remembering. Not because we were perfect, but because we were awake. Because we had the courage to turn toward the pain instead of passing it on. Because we chose presence over performance, connection over correction, wholeness over legacy. And when the next generation asks, where did this peace come from? The answer will be unspoken, but known. It came from you. From the way you sat with your grief instead of projecting it. From the way you broke your silence to speak love. From the way you dared to live differently. Karma ends, light begins. This is not the end of the story. This is the beginning of a new lineage. One that carries not fear, but freedom. Not guilt, but grace. Not confusion, but clarity. A lineage where love is not earned, but embodied. Where truth is not punished, but welcomed. Where children grow up feeling seen because someone, somewhere, chose to see themselves first. Let that someone be you. Let this be your legacy, not the pain you inherited, but the light you passed on. You are not born to repeat what hurt you. You were born to remember what heals. The silence ends with you. The patterns end with you. The light begins with you. As you choose awareness over reaction, presence over legacy, you become the ancestor your children will one day thank, not because you are perfect, but because you were awake. Thank you for walking this path. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for choosing light.